With tensions on the Korean Peninsula once again rising, I and my friend James at Look Back History have decided to investigate why there are two Koreas. I'll be covering the Hermit Kingdom of North Korea on my channel, while James will be covering the South on his channel. So be sure to check out his video, link will be in the description. Following the surrender of the Empire of Japan at the end of the Second World War, the Korean Peninsula, like Germany and Austria in Europe, was divided into two occupation zones separated by the 30th parallel. The north was occupied by the Soviet Union, and as such they encouraged communist and socialist thought and governance in their zone. Talks between the two superpowers on the reunification of the peninsula failed in 1946, and so occupation continued, until on the 9th of September 1948, Kim Il-sung, a communist revolutionary in the north, officially founded the Democratic Republic of Korea, or as we all know them today, North Korea, with Soviet blessing. In the same year, Soviet forces began to withdraw from North Korea. For 2 years, an uneasy peace between the South and North existed. This, however, was doomed to break, as both Kim Il-sung in the north and Syngman Rhee in the south both wanted to reunify Korea under their own flag. The North moved first. With the support of Stalin, the USSR, who had successfully tested their first atomic bomb a year before, forces of the Korean People's Army, KPA, invaded South Korea on the 25th of June, 1950. The KPA quickly overran southern positions, managing to occupy the southern capital of Seoul on the 20th of June, a mere 3 days after the war began. The imminent collapse of the southern regime to a possible communist takeover on the Korean peninsula prompted the US and a Western UN coalition to intervene. It must be noted here, however, that this intervention was only possible as the USSR, who was a permanent member of the UN Security Council, had been boycotting the UN over a decision not to recognize the recently founded People's Republic of China. The UN intervention in the Korean War turned the tide of the war, putting the invading KPA on the back foot. In a steady advance northwards, coalition forces liberated and occupied Seoul on the 25th of September 1950. The UN forces then repulsed the KPA back over the 30th parallel on the 1st of October 1950. On the 30th of September, the commander of the coalition forces, US General Douglas MacArthur, the hero of the Pacific, received the following eyes-only message from the US Secretary for Defense saying, "We want you to feel unhampered tactically and strategically to proceed north of the 30th parallel." Finally, on the 7th of October, UN forces were authorized to advance into North Korea. Now, since the start of the war, the People's Republic of China had been preparing to invade Korea if they deemed it necessary. Upon seeing the UN coalition moving swiftly through North Korea, and worried that they may continue over the Yalu River into China, Mao Zedong sent 300,000 Chinese troops across the Yalu River, officially entering the war. On the 17th of December 1950, Kim Il-sung was deprived of the right to command the KPA by Chinese. The Chinese and KPA forces soon pushed the UN forces out of North Korea. For the next 2 years, fighting raged around the 30th parallel, with both sides gaining and losing ground, until on the 27th of July 1953, an armistice was signed. Although no official end to the war, most historians consider this to be the end of the Korean War. The armistice set up the Korean DMZ, or Demilitarized Zone, running in and around the 30th parallel. Today, the DMZ is one of the most militarized borders in the world. The Korean War resulted in the death of 12 to 15% of North Korea's population and heavy damage to the country after 3 years of war. Even to this day, the North claims it won the war, despite failing to achieve its aim in unifying Korea under the DPRK. Over the next few decades, North Korea would spend the time industrializing, while Kim Il-sung spent the time consolidating his power. Following the conclusion of the war, Kim Il-sung gradually consolidated and increased his power. Within North Korean politics at the time, there were four main factions. The Yan'an faction, made up of returnees from China, the Soviet Koreans, made up of ethnic Koreans from the USSR, the Native Koreans, led by Pak Hon-yong, and Kim's Kapsan group, who had fought a guerrilla war against the Japanese in the 1930s. On the 30th of August 1953, the Workers' Party Congress opened. During the Congress, a leading member of the party, Cho Chong-ik, made a speech criticizing Kim Il-sung's concentration of power and of the party's hardline policy on industrialization, which ignored the widespread famine and starvation present in the country. Kim deflected this criticism with false promises of modifying the regime to be less authoritarian and more open. Following this Congress, a large purge of the party was conducted by Kim to consolidate his power and Stalinist policies. It was also around this time that the cult of personality that is a hallmark of the North Korean state began forming. In 1955, Nikita Khrushchev made a sweeping denunciation of Stalin and Stalinism in general. This prompted many members of the North Korean government to once again openly criticize Kim's regime. This, however, prompted another purge by Kim and resulted in the removal of 70% of the 1956 Central Committee by 1960. The death of Stalin allowed Kim's personality cult to officially grow to include his revolutionary family bloodline and officially name Kim as the Great Leader. It also allowed for the replacement of Marxist-Leninism by Juche, self-reliance, within the North Korean state. When thinking of North Korea, the image of poverty and economic stagnation is one of the main things you associate with the Hermit Kingdom. However, up until the 1970s, North Korea had a thriving and growing economy. The economic reconstruction of North Korea proceeded with massive Chinese and Soviet aid. North Korea, like all post-war communist states, prioritized industrialization and militarization at the expense of production of consumer goods. Within a decade, North Korea had managed to build an industrialized command economy from the ruins of the Korean War. During a state trip to North Korea in 1960, Che Guevara, a Cuban minister at the time, proclaimed North Korea a model for Cuba to follow. 5 years later, the British economist Joan Robinson described the economic development of North Korea as a miracle. As of the late 1970s, 60 to 70% of North Korea's population was located in urban regions, and North Korea had a GDP per capita that was estimated at the time to be the equivalent of the Republic of Korea in the south. However, this economic success and the accompanying rise in living standards came to an end in the 1970s. Kim Il-sung wished to lessen his nation's dependence on China and the USSR, and so borrowed heavily on foreign currency to invest in its military and vanity projects. The government had believed they would be able to pay off these loans using North Korea's mineral exports. However, unfortunately for North Korea, the 1973 oil crash led to a steep decline in the value of its mineral exports, leaving the DPRK in huge debt and with no way to pay. In 1974, they began to default on their debts and finally stopped all repayments in 1985, which, as a result, stopped North Korea from being able to buy modern technology from abroad. The DPRK was now in a state of economic stagnation and decline, heavily reliant on Soviet and Chinese aid and support. This meant that when the USSR collapsed in the 1990s, the North Korean economy went into freefall, which was prevented only by its economic ties and aid from its only ally, China. Now isolated from the international community, with its only ally being China, North Korea became the state we all know today, isolationist, xenophobic, and with a cult of personality surrounding the Kim dynasty. This video was a collaboration, as I mentioned in the beginning, with James from Look Back History. Here's James now to talk a little about his own video and channel. Take it away, James.
Thanks, Wolves. On my channel, I've covered the Korean War from the perspective of South Korea and the West, as well as the history behind Japan's acquisition of Korea in the early 20th century. You can check out my video on the South via the link down below. Thanks for watching.
If you enjoyed this video, then please do hit that like button and share it with friends. If you want to see more content from me, then please do consider subscribing. If there's a topic you want to see me cover, then let me know down in the comment section below. You can also join the History of Wolves Discord channel. It will be in the comment section as well as the description. I'll see you in the next video. This has been Adam from History of Wolves.